Hi! Okay, so today I'm doing something different from what I typically do. So this is the first video in my gardening series. I'm going to be documenting my gardening journey this year for 2025. Now let me tell you about my gardening origin story. Is that what it's called? Yeah, origin story. So I actually started gardening when I was a kid, maybe like 7 or 8 years old. And I really loved it because I could actually see the fruits of my labor, literally. Plus, it was something that adults told me I was good at. They would say I had a green thumb, so to speak. And as a kid, I wasn't really good at a lot of things that I felt like other kids my age were good at, like academics and that sort of thing. So I really clung to anything that adults or other kids would tell me I was good at. For example, like I was always told I was really good at art related stuff and gardening. So I really clung to those ideas. And when you're a kid like that, it makes you feel good, of course, when someone tells you that you are good at something. And it made me feel even better because I struggled with things that other kids didn't. It made me feel proud of myself that I was good at something that most people weren't, like art or gardening. Needless to say, it made me happy to garden when I was younger, so I decided why wouldn't it make me happy again? So after well over 10 years of not gardening, I picked it back up again in 2023. And can I just say I was certainly correct, and gardening did make me happy again, just like it did when I was a kid. Still just as fulfilling and rewarding as ever. So like most people, I've been chasing this nostalgia for the past couple of years. And I mean, I think nostalgia was on an all-time high during the panoramic, understandably so. You know, just hoping for happiness again, you know, trying to chase a better time that we all remember when things were simpler and we were young and didn't have to worry about stuff and the world wasn't completely on fire like it is now. That's putting it lightly. And honestly, I feel like this chasing of nostalgia has kind of worked for me, I fear. I mean, I started gardening again and it brought this wave of nostalgia back and it made me feel really happy. I even started watching wrestling again, which I haven't watched since the 2000s, but since they put that on Netflix, I'm locked in, you know? And it really does bring me back to a happier time. I will say though, the whole Disney remaking all of their movies into live action, I did not need, because honestly they have not done a very good job. And they're about to ruin another childhood favorite of mine, Lilo and Stitch. Like, what are we doing there, guys? But that is not the point. That all being said, I really want to document my gardening journey this year in hopes of helping out myself, you know, especially if others have tips and tricks and things like that that I could learn from. Plus just like look back on my mistakes and do better next time kind of thing, as well as help others who are aspiring gardeners. I mean, I don't know everything. I'm not a professional. I didn't study agriculture or anything like that. I'm just a girl chasing nostalgia, like I just said. Plus, I really like watching videos like this. I mean, when I first started gardening again back in 2023, I binged so many like gardeners channels. Very entertaining. I don't know. I like plants. I like plants, so watching that kind of stuff is fun for me. But enough of my rambling, and let's get into log 1 of this gardening journey for 2025. Real quick before we start, this video is a little lengthy, so if you want to skip to a certain part or skip over a certain part, I put very detailed timestamps in the description box. Okay, so enjoy. I just want to go through the timeline. So we have seed starting, which is from February to April for me. March to May is seedling care. May is garden prep. May to June is planting. June to August, garden care. July to September is harvest season. And then October is when I prep for winter. So I'm breaking up this garden journey into logs, sort of probably going to correspond with my little timeline here. It doesn't mean that there's going to be one video per log. There might be multiple videos. It's really going to depend. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work out. Anyway, now over the past 2 years, I've learned it's not as easy as planting seeds, waiting for them to grow and all that. There's a lot more that goes into it. And so now we're going to get into that because there is quite a bit of prep work to be done before we actually get into planting the seeds, okay? So, starting off, we have to find our planting zone, also known as the hardness zone. This is important because once you figure out your zone, it will help you choose plants that are going to be suitable for the climate and area that you are in. This will of course ensure that you pick plants that will survive and thrive within your garden. Basically, knowing your hardness zone is important because, I love mangoes, they're my favorite fruit. Unfortunately, because of the climate here in Canada, I cannot grow mangoes. So you don't want to waste time, money, energy, effort into trying to grow something that is just not going to grow in your zone. And as you can see by the little map that I've included, I live in Canada and more specifically in Ontario, and my zone is 5B. Next, we have to figure out the frost dates. The frost dates define the growing season. The time between the last spring frost and the first fall frost determine how long plants have to grow, flower, and produce fruit. So the last frost of spring is important because it helps you determine the best time to start your seeds according to that date, which will be different for everybody depending on your zone and where you are in the world. But the first frost of fall lets gardeners know when to finish up their harvest and start preparing for winter. Of course, you can find these frost dates really easily with a quick Google search, but I have another suggestion. So back in 2023, I found this app called the Planter app, and I think it's super helpful for like new gardeners or even if you're an experienced gardener. So I bring it up because I'm going to continue to bring it up throughout all of these videos because they have really helpful features that will aid you in your gardening journey. But for now, let's talk about how this app can help us with finding our frost dates. So if you go into settings, there will be an area that says location and frost dates. Here it will give you the option to put in your location or turn the location on your device and it will find it for you. As you can see, mine is already filled out, but it's as simple as that, and then it just gives you your spring frost and fall frost dates. It also tells you how long your growing season will be, and again, I think this is pretty accurate, especially because it's using your exact location. So my last spring frost is around May 13th. Okay, now let's talk about our garden method and size. So what is the method of gardening that you're going to use? Now, there's plenty of ways that you can garden. There's row gardening, raised garden beds, containers, pots, greenhouses, square foot gardening, which is what I will be using and I'll talk about in a minute. These are all things to think about. You can kind of do your own research on each one and pick the best method for you and your garden, but for me it's square foot gardening. And how big is your garden? And when I say how big is your garden, I mean measure it, okay? Get a measuring tape, measure it by square feet, the length and width, and if you have like a raised garden bed, then the height as well, because we're gonna need these measurements a little bit later. Okay, so let me talk about square foot gardening. So this is a method or technique of gardening that involves dividing the garden area into square foot sections, each of which is planted with a different type of crop based on the mature plant's size. To put it more basic, each square foot would have a different plant. And a different amount of plants depending on the type or variety. It's easy and it kind of really puts things in perspective. As you become a better gardener, you may not have to use this method anymore, but I think if you're a first timer, this is definitely the way to go. Okay, now that we know our zone, our frost dates, our garden method and size, we can finally pick seeds. Now, as I explained before, you want to pick seeds that are going to grow well within your zone, but there's also a few other things to think about whilst picking your seeds. How much space do these types of plants need to grow? Do they vine or bush? Because if they bush, they take up more space, but if they vine, then you're going to have certain accommodations for vining plants. Are the plants determinate or indeterminate? I'll explain that in a minute. What is the plant's cycle? I'll explain that in a minute. And do the varieties of plants that you're picking have any kind of special needs? Sometimes zucchinis, they need to be pollinated manually. Not always, but sometimes. So basically, if you don't want to do things like that, maybe don't pick that variety of plant. Now let's go back to the determinate or indeterminate plants. So determinate plants basically means that once they hit maturity, they stop growing. So that could be like 4 feet tall, for example, and they won't grow any taller than that. Indeterminate plants are the opposite. They will continue to grow even after reaching maturity, as long as the conditions and environment allow for it. Lots of tomato plants tend to be indeterminate, so they will just continue to grow if you're not pruning them. Now let's talk about the plant cycle. So the plant cycle is classified by the number of years or growing seasons that it takes for the plant to complete its life cycle. These classifications are annual, which means it takes 1 year, biennial, which means 2 years, and perennial, which means it takes more than 2 years. Now, these two things, determinate plants or indeterminate, and the plant cycle, are important because you want to make sure that you have enough space in your garden, and these type of plants may need extra pruning and that sort of thing. If you're going to plant a perennial, for example, like strawberries, those will continue to come back. So if you're the type of person that's going to want to plant something different every single year, then maybe planting perennials is not going to be a good idea. Or if you do want to plant perennials, then putting them in a certain spot in your garden may be important as well. So just something to think about. So the planter app can actually help you pick seeds as well. If you go to the plants, I'm going to pick tomatoes. It'll open up into the page, and then if you scroll down a bit, it'll say varieties, and if you just click on that, it will show you a whole bunch of different varieties that you can like filter and that kind of thing. Or you can even just search a specific type, and then like they kind of give you a little blurb telling you like what it tastes like, and sometimes they even tell you like what they would be good to use for in certain recipes or whatever. So it's sort of like, you know, somewhere to at least start if you're not sure what types of varieties and things like that you may want. Okay, so real quick, I just wanted to show all of my seeds that I have, because I made this little like chart for them in Notion that shows the different varieties, the date before the last frost to start them, whether they should be started indoors or outdoors, how deep you need to plant the seeds, the germination rates, if they're frost tolerant, if they're indeterminate or determinate, the plant cycle, and the weather that they are best suited for. Now, I'm not necessarily going to be planting all of these varieties of seeds this year, but these are the seeds that I have. Okay, now for the fun part, making a garden layout. Now that we've picked our seeds, mapping out the garden I think is super important before we even start planting our seeds. So because I'm doing the square foot gardening method, this makes it super easy for me to just take the dimensions of my garden that we measured out before and put them into a grid format. I also like to do this for any containers or pots that I'll be using as well, just for a really full picture of what my garden is going to look like. Now, I think this is important because this is when you get to map out where each of your plants is going to go. But as we're doing this, I think there are some things that should be thought about. How many of each variety of plant do you want? How many plants can be planted per square foot? Because for some varieties of plants, they can have multiple in 1 square foot, whereas others need multiple square feet for one. Think about companion planting and combative planting. I'll talk about that in a minute. Think about pests. Like, do you need a fence? Is there a lot of squirrels or rabbits in your area that might disturb your garden? And the sunlight placement. Now, if you're just starting a garden for the first time and you're trying to pick a good spot in your backyard, think about where the sun hits the most during the day to get the best results, because most plants need full sunlight. But also you want to think about the sun placement because certain plants that you may be planting are going to need more sun than others. So understanding where the sun hits the most in your garden can also be very important. Okay, let's go back to the whole companion and combative planting. So companion planting is when certain plants are grown together because they benefit each other in one way or another, like repels pests, boost pollination, nutrient sharing, etc. This can obviously be very beneficial for your garden. For example, tomatoes can often be planted with marigolds or basil as a companion plant. Now, combative planting is the complete opposite. Combative planting is when plants negatively affect each other by competing for resources, attracting harmful pests, spreading disease, stunting each other's growth, etc. So there are just certain plants that are not good together. So the planter app also gives a lot of detail on each plant. So for example, I'm going to click on tomatoes and it opens up into the page. It gives you like a little spiel here, quick info section. It tells you like what the plant needs, what it's looking for, just like the basic information about it. And some even have the plant cycle. For strawberries, if we look, see it tells you that it's a perennial. We also have the growing calendar, which will become important later and only shows up once you have entered in your location. So instead of you Googling every single individual plant, you can just use this planter app. It just makes it so easy. It even has information like the nutrients, the type of pests a plant attracts, which I think is so cool and really helpful because it just gives you an idea of what to look out for. Same thing with diseases. And of course it has the beneficial critters as well. And if you scroll down even more, there's more information. So another thing I think is really cool is the related article section in each of the plants. Like, it's so cool to have that there. But if you want to see like all of the articles, you go to guide and it'll open up and show you all the articles, not just ones related to a specific plant. And a lot of these articles can be really helpful and they're just about a whole bunch of different things, as you can see. I swear this app is so cool. Okay, so I'm going to use the planter app to show you how to map out your garden. So we're going to push new garden. Boom, you can name it. I'm going to just put... So you can of course change the dimensions of your garden. So this is square foot gardening, obviously. There we go, my dimensions are in. Then of course you can start adding your plants. So I'm starting off with strawberries. If you do this, you can copy and paste it, if you will, like so. Or if you don't want one there, you can compost it. So these little green circles in between the plants here is actually telling you that these are okay to be next to each other, that they are companion plants even. But if I were to put, let's say, peppers, the red circles, that means that they are combative plants and that you shouldn't plant them directly next to each other. However, if I move my pepper over here, it's next to a companion plant and it's okay because it's far enough away from the tomatoes. Now, this is great or whatever, but obviously the dimensions are not as perfect as the, garden map that I can draw myself. Also, these little numbers here beside some of the plants tells you how many you can plant per square foot. These are just suggestions, or at least the most ideal for that plant. But as you become a better gardener and understand your plants more, you can kind of waver from this a little bit. Alright, so that is my garden map on the Planter app. And I mean, if your garden has very exact dimensions, then you can probably just do your garden layout on here, but I do think drawing it out yourself can be better, so it's up to you. Okay, now let's physically draw our garden. All you need to do this, obviously, would be like a piece of paper and a pen or pencil or something to write with. I'm doing this on my tablet just because it makes it easier for me to screen record it, but obviously you do not need to do that. So as you can see, I have like a little grid layout, and we're just going to pretend that each of those squares equals 1 square foot. So my dimensions are 16 by, like, the main area of the garden is 3.5 feet, but in certain areas it's either 4 feet or 4.5 feet. So the benefit to drawing out the garden yourself is you can put in exact dimensions and add any obstacles or anything like that that your garden may have. So there are some bushes that have probably been there since like the 70s, so they're not movable. So I kind of got to work around that. And I also put in like the fence that my garden sits up against. So my garden is shaped a little weird, so I kind of just like blocked out the usable space in the garden and just like made it very clear where I could plant and where I can't. Just to get like a really exact picture of what I have to work with. So this like blue-green line that I'm putting in is representative of this like netted fence type thing that I make to keep out pests. Although the biggest pest that I have regarding my garden is probably my dog, but it keeps her out pretty much. The little pink squares are stakes that I use to hold up the net. So I'm also adding in like the sun and the direction that it goes in. So I'm lucky and my garden gets full sun like all day long basically, because it sets, you know, behind the garden. Okay, now for the fun part, actually adding our plants. So I'm just like writing the name of plant. I think later I'll end up writing the specific variety, but for now I'm just like writing the name of the plant and also putting a number, as in the number of plants that I want per square foot. So for my beans, they're gonna need to be trellised because some of them are pole beans and others are bush beans. So I think I'm just gonna use like excess of my garden net and then use some stakes to hold it up to make my own like DIY trellis. That's what I'm thinking. We'll see how that actually works out. And these little pink circles are just stakes because tomatoes need to be staked, cucumbers, beans if they're pole beans, peppers if you're doing peppers. Most plants tend to need to be staked. Ooh, that was a tongue twister. Now these other circles, these like hoops, they're tomato cages. They're like cages for the plants. I don't even know if I have any. I feel like I do, but I have to go check. But I'm thinking for the cucumbers that it would be best to cage them because cucumbers tend to like go wild a little bit. So having them in a cage I think is easier. I would still stake them, but I don't know. If I have cages, I might try that because that's what I used to do way back in the day. So I'm also thinking of doing a little bit of companion planting with the spices. So I'm thinking basil in between the tomato plants. I'm still not sure, but I think I'm gonna try that this year. And I'm also thinking I might try to grow spinach. We'll see how that works out. I'm really not sure. But like I said before, all of this is very much subject to change. It just depends how well my seedlings are doing. Okay, so I quickly just went back and added the variety of plant instead of just putting like tomato. Okay, so I think this is the final version for right now. So yeah, that's my garden layout. Alright, so that's it for log 1 prep work. In the next video, we'll actually be planting our seeds. It'll be log 1, seed planting, so stay tuned for that one. Okay, bye!